Sleeping that night filled us with determination for the next day. I was hopeful, rooting that everything was going to be alright, which means it's not going to be. Of course, not everything turns out the way we want, because there would be no story. The morning came at last, rising me from my sleep. Surprisingly, I was full of energy, ready to go and take on the day's training. However, I quickly realized that I was alone. Oh no, Matthew, why? Huh? Matthew? I sat up and looked around, not seeing him anywhere in the room. Worry crept into my mind. What if he left to do something he was influenced to do? What if he tried to figure out a way to force the influence out of him? I gripped my bed sheet to remove it from my body when I looked up to see the door swing open, revealing Matthew holding 2 plates of food for me. Aw, you sweetheart.
Good morning!
America. I became dumbstruck. Matthew? What was up with him, and why was he up so early? He wasn't exactly an early bird. Matthew grinned as he walked over and presented a plate of delicious-looking fruit, eggs, bacon, toast, and pancakes I had ever seen. I guess that makes sense. My mouth went agape at the mere sight and smell, and I slowly took it from Matthew's hands. Matthew? When did you make this?
This morning, duh! When else would I have been able to make it?
I looked up at him. He seemed very happy and cheerful, despite everything that happened the night before. Did he manage to drive out the influence? As I noticed the dark circles under his eyes, I could tell that the night had become somewhat of a struggle, so maybe that was indeed the case. Still, something in my gut pressed me to be cautious. Something wasn't entirely right about the situation, even though seeing Matthew being happy made me happy too. I slowly began to dig in, savoring every delicious bite and almost forgetting my worries about it. Wow, this is amazing! Matthew let out a happy sigh and nodded.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna go to training now.
I suddenly shook my head, trying to take in what he had just said. He was going to training now? I looked at him as he began to turn around, holding out an arm for him. Whoa, 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 hold on there!
Bye!
What? Despite my protest, Matthew left the room, practically skipping out of it. What the hell is going on here? Something was now definitely wrong. I lowered my plate and stood racing towards the door, but was stopped by Diana, who was about to step in. Wah!
Oh, I'm sorry.
Diana looked me up and down before looking at the plate of food I had left on my bed, and looking at the plates of food she had in her hand, obviously meant for me and Matthew.
When did you...
I shook my head. Diana didn't know Matthew was making me food. I became more and more worried. Diana stepped in and placed her plates on the nearby table, crossing her arms in concern.
All right. Do you now wish to tell me what is going on?
I naturally bit my lip. I couldn't tell her. Something about this warning me that whatever was influencing Matthew could have gotten worse. I began to internally panic, but I kept a look of calm on my face. Matthew just made me breakfast. That's all.
When was this?
I grimaced, looking away. Apparently this morning. Diana shook her head and pressed her fingers into her temples, slowly exhaling an irritated sigh.
That boy is seriously concerning me now.
Don't call him a boy. He's sensitive about it. I didn't mean to explode, but after hearing Matthew's worries the night before, I couldn't help but naturally defend him. Diana stared wide-eyed at me, most likely wondering where my sudden outburst came from. Even though I had vocally challenged her, Diana let out a sigh and, crossed her arms.
Regardless, I'll have people watch over him. If he does anything out of the ordinary, I will be the first to know.
Great. Diana gave me a hard stare for a moment before turning and leaving the room. I became torn. Matthew didn't want help, but it seemed like he very much needed it. What if this was all something I was overreacting from? What if he was hiding something vitally important? I gripped my head and shook it. Stop it. Stop it. Calm down. That's right. I had to calm down first. This wasn't going to be easy, but the truth would come out one way or another. I ate my food and prepared for the day, praying that I would not hear of Matthew killing someone. We can hope. As I arrived in the hall for training, I was surprised, for some reason, to see Diana in the room, and instead of Saero, not with Saero. Diana? Diana turned to me and crossed her arms, taking in my form.
You will be training with me today. I apologize for Saero's absence.
What happened? What do you mean? Where's Saero?
He asked to train on his own for the day. As he will be in the front lines of the siege, I granted him permission.
I pressed my lips together into a fine line, but nodded. If he was charging at the front, then it made sense that he'd want to take a day and work on himself. I held my hand out and summoned my weapon, ready to fight the queen of the rebellion head-on. All right, then don't hold back. Diana nodded and prepped her stance, summoning her saber and bringing it back behind her. I had to use this new training partner as a new experience. Not everyone would fight like Saero, so this was a good challenge for me. Fighting with Diana was no easy task. She was quick and thought 10 steps ahead of me, catching me off guard at some points. Still, I could tell that I was putting up a good fight with my defense. What surprised me was how time passed by without me even noticing it. The more I clashed with Diana, the more ignorant I became of the sky's eventual descent from light purple to dark orange. Soon enough, our training had ended. I panted, out of breath, but surprisingly still on my feet. I didn't understand how or why, but I could only assume that I was getting better, which was a good thing. Diana smirked as she relaxed, stretching back and making her saber vanish.
I will admit, dear, you've done well for just a handful of days.
Well, thanks. I grinned, happy to hear that I had impressed Diana with my skills. I only trained for a couple of days, but showed great improvement. Maybe the demon world was aiding me in becoming a stronger person. Thank you, Diana. Diana nodded before walking to the exit of the room.
Now, please excuse me. I must see to the boys. You are free to come with if you'd like.
I probably should. Oh, come on! I'm worried about that man, not boy. Man of mine! I declined and left the room as well towards the opposite direction, feeling my bed calling to me. Besides, I didn't want to be a distraction. As I was heading to my room, I passed by a door that was only open a small crack, overhearing a quiet conversation.
This idea is idiotic, guard. Leaving during a war could be considered treason, and you would be abandoning your duties to your mistress.
What are you guys up to?
I know that, but...
Keep walking. Well, we're curious, so... I stopped walking and peered inside, wanting to see what was going on with my two most handsomest guys. So handsome. Saero was standing steadfast by the large fireplace as Shadow, arrogant as ever, loomed over the small table that was covered in maps and books.
Do you really think a quest like this is beneficial to the war? All it would do is leave us with one less powerful ally for a significant amount of time.
I would not be gone long. I've researched this.
Yes, I have researched this route multiple times. You've already spouted that more times than I care to appreciate. Regardless, even if things did go your way, and you journey there and back without some form of incident, you would turn up a day before the siege. Your mistress will not likely forgive your absence.
But I have a feeling that this will be worth that absence. If I can do this, if I can prove that my love for her is real.
Oh, Saero.
You are having delusions of grandeur. Love does not exist for us demons. This quest is folly.
Hush. I glared at Shadow. Why was he being such an ass? Saero, however, looked to his feet, gritting his teeth and shutting his eyes.
You came here and asked for my counsel, guard. I am merely telling you the truth of the matter. Whatever hope that human placed in your mind is illogical, and only a detriment to our cause.
Oh, hush you, Vulcan. This is love.
I hope you take my words into careful consideration. Nothing fruitful will come from this journey you wish to undertake.
As he finished speaking, Shadow faded into a black shadow on the ground and slipped into the dark corner of the library, vanishing from sight completely. Saero growled beneath his gritted teeth and slammed his fist against the mantel behind him, forming a large crack in the stone.
Damn it.
Let's talk to this boy. Shadow was wrong. Whatever Saero wanted to do to prove his love for Diana was worth it. I felt my heart agree with my thoughts with a firm thump in my chest. We're getting them together, gosh darn it, one way or another. I opened the door and entered the room. Saero looked up at me with a startled gaze when he heard the door creak as it opened.
Oh,
Saero looked down at the table, embarrassed, while he rubbed the back of his neck.
How long were you there?
Long enough. Long enough to hear what Shadow said about me. With a frown, Saero turned his gaze to his feet. As I stepped further into the room, he let out a sigh.
I've been thinking a lot about what we've talked about. You asked me if there was a way to prove my love to Azair. Well, there is a way.
I want to hear this. Really? Saero nodded before ushering me over to the table. I walked over and looked at what Saero wanted to show me. A large set of maps all pointing to a single area in the Abyssal Plains near the ocean.
There's a legend that has been passed around the demon world for eons. The Golden Rose. It's said that if someone finds its hiding place and proves that the love in their heart is real, the rose will blossom and become physical proof of their true love.
Aw, James! Aw, making me all... Ugh. James, when you got all those gold roses for that proposal. Gosh. Well, gosh. Is this legend true?
No one can say for sure. No one has ever found it, yet the legend exists, so it must have some form of merit. I've tried for years to find its location, and now I have.
I wonder if Angel's response is different if you're on James's story when picking Saero as a trainer. That'd be kind of interesting. Saero pointed at a hand-drawn circle on the map and glided his finger along the map towards the area where the rose was said to be.
It would only take me 2 days to get there and to return. If the story is true, then I'm positive I can find it and bring it back to Azair as proof of my love.
As Saero finished, his smile darkened to a sad grimace.
However, I have been advised against this journey, and for good reason. I would be abandoning my lady days before the final battle, and that alone could be considered treason. Even more so, would she forgive me for leaving at such a crucial time?
I mean, you've been waiting for 100 years. I don't know why you have to do it right before the, world battle of the Abyssal Plains, but hey, story reasons. I looked at Saero's face, seeing the conflicting emotions running through his eyes as he stared at the maps in front of us. Was it really worth it?
Still, this may be my only chance to do this. When we win this war, my lady will require me to be by her side more so than ever. I must be there to support her at all times when she rebuilds this broken world, but I would lose the chance to prove my love to her.
Okay. I didn't know what to say in response. While I wanted him to do what he felt was right, there were so many things that could go wrong. What if the legend was false? He would be gone for nothing and would come back empty-handed. What if something happened while he was away? He wouldn't be able to return in time to help. Or what if something happened to him on his journey? He wasn't invincible. I closed my eyes, trying to figure out what to say to him. When I realized what I wanted to say, I spoke up. Go. You should go. Win her love, man. The Golden Rose achievement. Saero really loved Diana. It was plain as day, and if she wasn't persuaded yet from his words and dedication, this journey would convince her. It was worth the risk if he was really in love with her. She was strong enough to handle things on her own while Saero was away. Saero looked at me in surprise as I smiled at him. If this will prove your love to her, then you should find the rose and give it to her. Whatever the risk is, if you believe it's worth it, then do it. Something in Saero's eyes glistened as if a spark had been ignited and the hope in his heart began to burn with joy. A smile grew onto his face as he nodded, now determined.
You're right. I'll leave tonight and come back with the rose, even if it's the last thing I do.
Don't say that. Just come back. I grinned widely. I was happy for him. To see Saero so determined to prove his love filled my soul with joy. As he stepped towards me, I watched as he wrapped his arms around me, giving me a friendly hug. My goodness, we bonded quickly.
Thank you for your help. I won't ever forget this.
Thank me when you return. You got this. I smiled and hugged him back, patting his back. At my words, he squeezed me tighter before letting me go. Saero nodded to me before rushing out of the library, most likely to set off on his journey as quickly as possible. He needed all the time he could get. I, however, felt my heart give an approving thud in my chest, which it does quite often. I had done the right thing. It raised the question, however, would I have done the same for the one I love? After a brief moment, I nodded to myself. Yes, I would have. I left the library and headed towards my room, now filled with determination of my own. To deal with shenanigans, probably. I quickly walked to my room, wanting to make it there before Matthew. As I turned the corner to the hall my room was in, however, a large number of shouts echoed.
Grab him! Don't let him get away!
Let go of me!
Shirtless Matthew. I stared wide-eyed as guards rushed into my bedroom and dragged Matthew out of it by his arms. I was even more surprised to see him slightly battered and covered in blood. What? Oh, come on now. I took a step forward to rush in and see what was going on, but a hand stopped me and pulled me back. I looked over and stared as Sam gripped my shoulder, glaring ahead at his brother. Sam, what's going on?
Matthew did something really fucking stupid.
Well, I gathered as much. Ripping Sam's hand from my shoulder, I turned around and glared, almost snarling in anger. What do you mean? What did he do? Sam looked to me, unfazed by my anger, and walked forward ahead of me, following the group of soldiers and Matthew down the hall. I did the same, now desperate to know what was going on. Whoa. Well, that's new. As we arrived at the Great Hall, Matthew was tossed into the center of the room where Rabbit had constructed a large magic circle. As Matthew fell to his hands and knees on it, the circle activated and formed a large barrier around him. Whoa. Frantic, Matthew rushed at the walls, slamming into them to hopefully be set free. He even formed multiple knives and tried to tear through the walls, only ending up with them ricocheting and landing on the floor.
Release me! No!
Matthew! I rushed forward, trying to touch the barrier, but was forcefully pulled back by Irene and Iridessa. I flailed in their arms, struggling against their hold, but became still as Diana entered the room with a large, bloody handkerchief in her hand.
You come into my castle, eat my food, rest in my rooms, and have the utter gall to kill one of my guards and try to steal war plans?
Well, he's obviously being controlled. I mean, come on, guys. No, it couldn't have been. I stared at Matthew as he locked eyes with Diana, sneering and pressing up against the barrier.
Well, well, well. If it isn't the Queen of the Rebellion. I gotta tell ya, you look like crap after all these years.
Yeah, someone's possessed you. Diana's face remained stone cold as she pressed the handkerchief to one of the nearby guards and stepped forward, pressing her hand to the barrier.
Lux.
On her word, the barrier suddenly began to brighten with lightning, shocking Matthew within it.
Ah!
It's necessary, man. I mean, Matthew, no! I began to struggle more, wanting this to stop. Soon enough, it did as Diana pulled her hand away from the barrier and glared into it. Matthew, having been electrocuted, fell to his hands and knees, panting wildly.
I can smell you, Demon Lord.
I froze. The Demon Lord? He was behind this? I thought it was his mother, but the Demon Lord? I looked back at Matthew, seeing him chuckle despite being in utter pain.
You figured me out, huh? You may have locked me away in my castle, but my bond to my blood is unbreakable.
It's funny that you took over Matthew, of all people. Matthew pounced off of the ground and slammed into the barrier wall, grinning from ear to ear at Diana.
And when you come, I will be ready. I know all of your little plans, and will make sure that I completely destroy your precious army, one pathetic soldier at a time. Once I do, I'll make Zakeru my heir, and finally take over the rest of this godforsaken plane, for good.
Really? Making Matthew the heir? This time, however, Diana smirked and tapped the barrier between Matthew's eyes, her irises brightening to a sadistic gold color.
And this is where you fail in war, Demon Lord. Who said we ever wrote anything down about our plans?
Matthew stared astonished at Diana before snarling madly.
You're lying!
Test me, mongrel. I will prove it on the day we lay siege upon your pathetic castle and dominate your puny army.
Despite how twisted the situation was, the rebel leaders and guards in the room began to nod and smirk at Matthew in agreement with Diana's words. Diana, however, pressed her face against the barrier.
And I swear to you, this war will end with you dying by the hands of a succubus.
The guards around Diana cheered as Matthew continued to glare hard at Diana, clawing at the barrier wall to try and get to her to no avail. Diana straightened back up and scoffed.
As for your son, we'll need to do a little surgery.
Yeah. Surgery? I pulled at Irene's and Irides's hands, staring at Diana like she was a mad woman. Surgery? What the hell did she mean, surgery? Without another word, Diana placed her hand on the barrier and sent another wave of electric shocks into the barrier before Matthew finally passed out entirely. No! Angel's so dumb. Anyway, at last, Iridessa and Irene released me, letting me rush forward and kneel at the barrier, pressing my hands against it and peering in to see Matthew lying unconscious on the floor. I looked up at Diana as she turned and glared at her. Why did you do that? Duh. Diana glared back at me before turning away from me, crossing her arms.
Why did you hide this from me?
No! I deserve an explanation! As Diana turned back to me at my explosion, I felt my body instantly froze in fear underneath her sudden golden gaze.
And one of my men deserves not to be dead. Because of your little secret, this boy managed to lose control to whatever has been possessing him and killed one of my top-ranking officers in order to find my decoy battle plans.
I let it sink in. Matthew had killed someone. The influence on him really forced him to kill someone. I couldn't believe it. As Diana released me from her enthrallment, I buckled to my hands and knees, panting for air.
Was hiding this worth it? Was his precious pride truly worth the life of one of my men?
I shut my eyes, knowing how wrong the situation was. Matthew was trying. He was fighting to stop whatever was taking control of him. He needed to do it on his own. However, before I could think of speaking back, James and Sam stepped forward in front of me, blocking me from Diana.
Forgive him, Diana. He wasn't in control of himself.
And now you're defending him?
He's his brother.
Shut the fuck up! You don't understand what he's been through.
And I don't care! One of my men is dead because of him! Controlled or not, it was his hands that took his life. No amount of pride can justify that.
Oh, come on now. The brothers silenced themselves as I took everything in. Matthew had killed someone, the brothers understood, and Diana had essentially been betrayed. Part of me screamed that this was all my fault. I didn't open my mouth to fix this. I didn't let anyone know what Matthew was going through. However, Matthew was desperate to do this himself, even though he failed in the end. I lowered my head to the ground, gritting my teeth and trying to stop myself from crying. Carrie and Twyla rushed to my side, wrapping their arms over me in an attempt to comfort me, but I couldn't feel anything but despair for what was going on. I mean, yeah, what else can you do except apologize? Doesn't bring the guy back, but it's better than not apologizing. In the end, this was entirely my fault. I didn't speak up when I should have, and now Matthew was in a cage of sorts, waiting to go through some form of surgery to fix him. I gripped the ground and looked up at Diana, tears flowing from my eyes. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry for what happened. Everything was my fault. I began to break down, feeling Carrie and Twyla fully wrap their arms around me in an attempt to calm me down. Still, I felt horrid, disgusting. The death of one man was entirely because of my silence. Silence lingered in the room as Diana continued to bore her eyes into my soul. At last, Diana let out an irritated sigh.
Enough. We need to figure out how to break this hold the Demon Lord has on him.
Everyone in the room seemed to agree. I rubbed my face and slowly stood, agreeing as well and now ready to fix what had happened. Diana looked to the guards over her shoulder and barked orders.
A chair, a bucket of sweet flowers, and a knife.
The soldiers nodded and saluted their queen before rushing off. Diana shook her head and placed her hand on the barrier.
What on earth could have made the control so strong?
His mother.
Everyone looked to Damien, seeing him look intensely at his fallen brother with worry.
I can hear her voice, pleading with him to wake up. She keeps apologizing for making him do what he did.
So his mother is to blame?
No. The Demon Lord is still the one who made him do what he did. The mother was a weakness of his, and only amplified his control.
Diana sneered at Matthew's unconscious body as the soldiers from before rushed in and placed the chair beside her and the bucket beside it. Diana slowly sat down and crossed her legs, holding out her hand and feeling a knife being placed into it by a third guard.
We need to figure out how to block his mind from the Demon Lord's control. Once we do that, we can try to dispel it, while the Demon Lord's power isn't using Matthew's energy.
Taking a purple peach-shaped fruit from the large basket, Diana began to peel it and slice it open, revealing a black center. However, her focus remained on Matthew.
It will take me some time, but I think I can manage it.
Are you sure?
I am. Everyone may go and sleep.
Everyone slowly nodded and began to leave the room. I, however, stood still, not wanting to leave Matthew alone. As Diana noticed me, she glared softly.
Go to your room and rest. I will call you if something happens.
Her words were venomous, warning me of the thin line I was walking across. As she placed a fruit slice in her mouth, I conceded defeat and left the room, staring at Matthew in utter worry before I exited. That night I slept alone. I was filled with different emotions. Worry, sadness, anger, betrayal, horror. Everything mixed and danced within me as I let out a heavy sigh. This would be a long night. I was barely able to eat or leave my room the following 2 days. I stayed in my room, trying to calm down and take everything in. Matthew was a prisoner, and Diana had to pull the control out of him somehow. How she was going to do that, I couldn't be sure, but I was certain that this was going to be a large challenge, especially since the Demon Lord was involved. The other wives visited me, helping me eat and go through what I had trained. However, my mind focused on Matthew. I was worried sick for him. I wanted him to be free, and I wanted him to be okay. I knew that this wasn't the case for the moment, but I knew that it had to happen eventually. After all, we were a day away from marching to the siege. So many things happening. I gripped my hair and closed my eyes, trying to remember if there was anything I did to help stop the control. I was there for him, but... It slowly dawned on me. I was there for him. His love for me was what kept him focused. I was there each time he lost control, and I managed to bring him down from that. It was something. A risky something, but something nonetheless. Oh boy. I rushed out of the room and into the grand hall, seeing Diana continue to stare into the barrier. Inside, however, was Matthew sitting cross-legged and smirking at Diana. Matthew. Diana and Matthew looked over at me, surprised to see me enter.
Human, what are you...
I ignored Diana and continued forward, standing in front of the barrier and staring into Matthew's eyes. Matthew, it's me. Wake up and get a hold of yourself. Matthew stared in shock at me before smirking and crawling over with a pout.
Aw, is the little human upset that she can't get fucked by her incubus?
I had to ignore him. The Demon Lord was taunting me, tempting me to get angry. Still, I concentrated on Matthew's eyes, knowing Matthew was in there somewhere. Matthew, I know you're there. You can fight this. I know you can. I could see a small glimmer in Matthew's eyes, proving that I was right. I smiled and pressed my hands against the walls of the barrier, trying to press myself against the magic blocking Matthew from me. Listen to me. You can stop this. You can do this yourself. I began to fill with hope. Despite my words also reaching the Demon Lord, Matthew was also listening, and I could only hope that my love was fueling his need to stop his father's control. The barrier beneath my hands slowly began to desolidify as my body slowly pressed into the wall and suddenly barrel rolled inside. Whoa! Gah!
No!
Wow, what a turn of events. I looked up, finding myself inside the barrier somehow, looking around and seeing Matthew staring at me intensely. I gulped, knowing that the Demon Lord was still there, running Matthew's every movement, every word that ran from his lips. Still, I believed in him. I slowly stood up and walked over, opening my arms for him. Matthew, I love you, and I'm here for you. Please, break through this and come back to me. Slowly, Matthew walked forward, shakily reaching out his hands for me, and my throat. I could see the desperation in his eyes as he tried to listen. Yes, that was it. I walked forward and held his hands before feeling them slide up to my cheeks, warming my face with his palms.
You.
Oh dear. For a moment, a glimmer of his blue eyes filled my heart with joy. I gripped his hands, desperate for him to hang on and fight. Finally, Matthew gritted his teeth and released my face, gripping his head.
Get out of my head!
Matthew! I rushed over, wrapping my arm around his back as Matthew sank to his knees, digging his fingers into his hair. I could hear Diana trying to see what was going on, but my body managed to block her view. Matthew looked up at the wall and snarled.
Get out!
Whoa. Matthew shouted at the sky, arcing back and releasing a large red wave of energy from his body. It zipped into the air and broke free of the barrier, circling over the ceiling like a thundercloud. In quick response, Diana pointed her hands out and formed a large purple orb in her hand before tossing it at the energy, capturing it in another cage and letting it hit the ground locked inside. My focus, however, was on Matthew. He panted and coughed, clasping over his neck and chest in pain as he shut his eyes tightly. I barely noticed the sound of Matthew's brothers and their wives running in to see what had happened. I lifted Matthew in my arms and caught his eyes as he opened them, seeing the man I loved once again back in my arms. Matthew? Matthew very slowly let a grin run across his face as he lifted a hand and cupped my cheek.
Hey, beautiful.
My breath hitched as I quickly fell forward and wrapped my arms around Matthew, uncaring that the barrier around us was slowly being dispelled by Diana. Matthew wrapped his arms around my form, hugging me tightly and kissing over my neck.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The moment seemed to last forever. A private world with me and Matthew in each other's arms, desperate not to let go. However, Diana's voice caused us to slowly separate and look up at her.
Not that I care that I'm breaking this moment apart, but we have more important things to do than this.
Diana. Diana rolled her eyes and took up the orb that held the Demon Lord's control energy, staring into it with a piercing gaze.
I will take care of this. But I'm positive that this is not all of it. After all, he did control you enough to kill.
I felt myself slump over. She really wasn't going to forgive him, but she was right. The Demon Lord's control was ultra-powerful. Who knew how much control he really had? Diana sighed and willed the orb away into the air before looking to us.
Well then, I've spent enough time fixing this. Now I must prepare for a war. Excuse me.
Bye. Diana nodded to us and left without another word. Matthew, however, grinned at me and nuzzled my forehead.
I guess I really did need saving after all.
Yeah, you did, you big dummy. I shook my head, knowing that was not true. I was there to help, not there to save. I kissed Matthew's cheek and smiled. I only helped you do it on your own. You broke his control over you, not me. We chuckled for each other, slowly standing and happy to be in each other's arms at last. James, however, stepped forward with a frown, causing Matthew to release me.
Matthew, I apologize for not being a proper brother for you and treating you with the respect you deserved. I would never want you to not trust me or the others.
Communication is so nice sometimes. In agreement, the other brothers stepped up and nodded, ashamed as well. Matthew stared at all of them in shock before kissing my cheek and stepping towards them.
Hey. You're my brothers. We're supposed to support and protect each other, right?
That's the ticket right there. All five of them smiled at each other, as I felt myself needing to rest once more. I held the wall slightly, maintaining my balance as I shook my head and looked up at the brothers, seeing them happily rekindle the brotherly love they had before. I looked at the wives, winking, before sneaking out. Matthew needed some time with his brothers to settle some differences. I would wait for him in the room.